Is there a new frontrunner in the shadow Republican race to succeed Donald Trump as president? This week, everyone noticed Marco Rubio.
Hello.
First, looking quite comfortable at the White House briefing podium. Then at the Vatican, exchanging gifts with Pope Leo after weeks of President Trump criticizing the pontiff, before Rubio went on to meet with Italy's prime minister. Of course, he is a Secretary of State, but it's tough not to compare him with J.D. Vance, the vice president right now. Sources have previously told us that President Trump has openly mused about his vice president's performance and even asked friends to compare Vance with Rubio. And that makes this video, uploaded by Rubio's team this week, seem all the more eyebrow-raising, shall we say.
What is your hope for America at a time such as this?
My hope for America? And my hope for America is what it's always been. I think it's the hope I hope we all share. We want it to continue to be the place where anyone from anywhere can achieve anything, where you're not limited by the circumstances of your birth, by the color of your skin, by your ethnicity, but frankly, it's a place where you are able to overcome challenges and achieve your full potential.
Congressman, that video, I guess it's not an ad, it's a video, but still it seems like a campaign ad, which I think is why I'm tripping on it. What did you make of Rubio's performance over the course of the past week? I realize it's early, sort of baked in, but let's be real, it's always ongoing.
Wow. That's what this week has shown for Team Rubio and for the interest Republican activists around the country. We've always talked about the memes. Mm-hmm. The Rubio memes have so dominated this year of him sitting on the couch and then the multiple different disguises of what he's doing. Every job that is the most treacherous, worst job of the week, of the day, whatever the meme is.
He was even a DJ briefly.
He was.
A couple weeks ago. I think we have a picture of that. I will admit that I don't know. I think I'm a little old for this meme. But here it is. Okay. There's the man himself. You got to wonder, what he's playing. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
The memes, and that shows you some level of political connectivity in this environment. But this week showed that this internal apparatus around the White House is very interested in his talent and what that could bring to a Republican successor to President Trump. Now, I think we have to ask the question, though, does Rubio actually want it? And that is a very secondary question to this whole atmosphere now.
Wanting any evidence
and wanting it
that he doesn't want it?
Of course he wants it.
What are you saying?
Yeah, of course he wants it. Also, I will say that it was a little masterful, I would have to say, because he's not only catering to Donald Trump, you're hearing his words also with Donald Trump on this the screen in the video, which he understands who his audience is. He understands he needs Donald Trump to go out there and support him in order to have your base. At the same time, he talks about you should not be limited by the color of your skin, where you come from, etc., which are words that would never come out of Donald Trump's mouth. And so at the same time, seems like he's trying to appeal to a broader electorate, which whoever runs will need to do that. Whether that works in a MAGA primary, no clue. But he's starting to lay the groundwork on the two.
Even if it's not just a MAGA primary, the two silhouettes you saw in that video, one Donald Trump, two Ronald Reagan. And he was speaking to, it's funny that you call it an ad, Kasie, because come on, this is a campaign ad. I'm Marco Rubio and I approve this message. He's Marco Rubio, he approves this message.
I mean, maybe my definition of ad is outdated because who even really cares about traditional TV spend? It's all about your phone anyway. Sorry.
But point being, there are two big voices in the American political right over the last generation, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, and he seems to be speaking to, like you said, Sochi, all things to all people, at least within who will be voting in that primary in a couple of years.
The message was vintage. I mean, that was like a Rubio 2016 ad, from pre-Trump times. Just the message, the inclusive message. I also said, wow, when I saw that on his Twitter feed. He's just blatantly launching a presidential campaign from his official account, is what it looked like. Also, I find the Rubio memes and the fact that he's doing everything funny when it's juxtaposed with the reality that Jared Kushner and Witkoff are the ones who are going to Ukraine, going to Iran, negotiating every war in the world. And he's actually, as Secretary of State, seems a little sidelined from being the main negotiators of our international crises. somehow, though, to his benefit, he still benefits from this idea that he's doing every job in the administration.
Take it a step further. It's not only, okay, so he's the Secretary of State, but there are these other folks in the Middle East doing a lot of the. He's also not Vice President of the United States, and we're here talking about his prospects as the future of the Republican Party. Where is J.D. Vance right now as we're having this? And it's a reminder.
He was in Iowa.
He's in Iowa, but it's a reminder of sort of what a crappy job Vice President is.
It is. I was looking. Look at the
first
optics.
100 years of our republic, the keys to the White House went through being Secretary of State.
Yes.
And then we've seen over the last 100 years, the keys to the White House are being Vice President, at least to the nomination. So this is going to be super interesting for us to follow, but also to show you that Republicans do have more than one choice, even if that choice goes through President Trump.
But if I had to look this week, like, okay, so Rubio is in the briefing room launching his presidential campaign, going to meet with the Pope, which is great. Like, he's Catholic, so is J.D. Vance, but he gets to be the one making peace with the Pope. And Vance is in Iowa campaigning for the midterms in a brutal cycle, trying to talk about affordability. Like, that's a tough job assignment. Like, it's a tough environment out there. Like, which platform would you rather have if you were potentially running for president? Like, I'd rather be Rubio this week.
The Secretary of State or Vice President thing, because it does ask the question, is he Thomas Jefferson or is he Dan Quayle? Right? Tough, deep cuts.
So here was a little bit of the Ruthless podcast on this back and forth between Rubio and Vance. This, of course, a group of Republican podcasters, but largely Hill aides actually come out of McConnell world that, you know, they've evolved. Now they're able to talk like MAGA. Let's see what they had to say.
Are we going to pretend like that's not a presidential candidate?
It sounds like a presidential
candidate. Are we going to do that? It's kind of hard to ignore at some point that this guy's becoming a thing that is larger than maybe even this administration had previously conceived of.
JD is going to have to work for it. He's going to be very hard to beat, but the reality is there's a race on.
What do you make of that? Because
that's the most popular Republican podcast around, and speaks to both the old world of the Republican Party and this new world of the Republican Party. What I make out of that is that they're saying the obvious thing that we're saying here. We have two people within this administration that are thirsty for the endorsement and embrace of President Trump so they can become the Republican nominee.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me there that they suggested that Rubio has kind of expanded beyond what anybody thought was possible, which is kind of the piece of this that I'm watching pretty closely.
As Vice President Vance made his first trip to Iowa as vice president. At the same time, Secretary of State Marco Rubio posted a video of an answer he gave to a question when he was giving a briefing at the White House, set to dramatic footage and music. It is meant as a celebration of the America's 250th anniversary. But it reads like something else. Take a look.
And my hope for America is what it's always been. I think it's the hope I hope we all share. We want it to continue to be the place where anyone from anywhere can achieve anything, where you're not limited by the circumstances of your birth, by the color of your skin, by your ethnicity, but frankly, it's a place where you are able to overcome challenges and achieve your full potential.
I mean, that could be, that would not be out of place on a New Hampshire or Iowa TV station.
Secretary Rubio's briefing this week generated more buzz among the Republicans I know than anything that's happened in the last year. He has the potential to keep the Republican base intact that President Trump got and bring back some of Trump's critics. We'll see if Vice President Vance has the same potential. I think Rubio demonstrated it this week. It's a long time, but I thought this was a pretty important moment.
What do you think?
Yeah, look, Rubio, you talk to people, hardcore MAGA voters. I think more than anybody else in the administration, Rubio has outkicked his coverage based on the expectations for him, A, with that crowd, and B, for the old world normie Republicans who've always loved Rubio. They're like, this guy is terrific. So I agree with Brad on the buzz. My assumption is, and Rubio has said this, Vance and Rubio will not run against each other. And so, however this shakes out, and I still think it would be enormously difficult to take the nomination away from a sitting vice president if he wants to get it.
I don't know. Ambition is a funny thing, and if you see there's cracks in the fissure, you go for it because you got to wait 4 years to go for it again. Or eight, right? That commercial should raise alarms in the Democratic Party. Here's the thing. There's a long way between now and exploratory committees and then the actual November vote. But what I will say is that what Democrats will need to do is to anchor Donald Trump to J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio. And if things continue in this trajectory, that anchor might be too heavy.
I think it's going to be very hard for somebody who is a face of the Trump administration to be successful in a general election in 2028. May get the Republican nomination.
Yeah.
It's going to be very, very hard for them to be successful in a general election in 2028.
Horace, what do you think? Where do you think the ledger is right now between Vance and Rubio?
The Republican Party, like the Democrats, often let the former vice president have the first shot when that position becomes open for president. In this particular case, the 80 million voters for Donald Trump, 2/3 of whom are Republicans, are going to have to be sold on who it is that best reflects their values and their views, and that's going to decide it, and that's good because competition is always a good
So are you
thing.
suggesting that they're not going to take Vance as the default, just hook, line, and sinker?
I think that there's likely going to be a real competition.
What do you think? I mean, Rubio has really been trying to raise his profile lately. and frankly, I mean, it seems like Vance has been doing the opposite just because the war, for example, is really not one of his core issues.
I think Trump loves when people climb over each other to get to him.
Sure.
I think that's what you're looking at right now. I also think I can't imagine Rubio subsuming to Vance. I just can't imagine Rubio being a VP under Vance. I just don't get it. I just don't think it's going to happen. I really think it's going to be Rubio and Don Jr. or something like that. I think you're going to have something a little bit different. I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
Like the two top candidates or a vice?
I think it's
president.
it might be president and VP. I think Don Jr. is really eyeing this really hard. When I was at the 2020 Republican convention, I actually thought it was going to be Ivanka, right? When she was actually talking
There's
up
a lot
there,
of talk about that,
right? And I don't even know if that's still going to be Ivanka, but I don't think Vance will be the nominee. I'm just going to put it out there right now.
I'm personally shocked that most charismatic person in America, J.D. Vance, is not on everybody's front-running list to be the president of the United States. I mean, the guy who famously said, if I have to lie to convince people to do what I want, then I'm just going to do it, about the cats and dogs thing. There's very little compelling about J.D. Vance, and I've always believed that is part of why Donald Trump chose him as his vice president.
I think J.D. Vance is Peter Thiel's boy, and I think that Peter Thiel is pretty much owning half the government at this point. And I think if Peter Thiel wants J.D. Vance in that position, he'll be in that position. I think we have to watch out for Tucker Carlson. I think he's the one that wants to run.
Tucker Carlson.
Tucker,
yeah.
I think he's the heir apparent.
So if you look at the two of the last three presidents, who would have thought that Barack Obama was going to be president, and who would have ever thought that Donald Trump was going to be president? So,
Sometimes they just
people are
come
going to be
out of
ready,
nowhere.
and I'm a big Donald Trump fan. I've worked with them, but probably people are going to be ready for a bit of a change after 8 years of Trump. Although, Abby, if you look at what's happening in these primaries around the country, whoever Donald Trump is tapping on the shoulder for these races is winning them. So he has a tremendous impact on who was winning.
But as you know, sometimes he chickens out and he's like, I like them both. Yeah, and that's part of the problem is that if you don't get the clear cut, endorsement, sometimes
Yeah, but
you're
look
just
at
out of luck.
Indiana where he took out a bunch of incumbent Republicans.
That's
in
true,
races.
right?
So-
That's because he hated them and wanted them out of office. But it's different when he's not sure where the winds are blowing. Sometimes he just doesn't make a decision.